Hello, everyone! If you're watching this, you missed day 1 of our week 15 Computer Science Principles lecture. Let's get to it. We are taking a look at a couple of exercises for debugging and scope, things we've talked about before, but bear repeating. I'm going to show you some alternative resources you can use to catch up on things that maybe aren't covered as well in this class, or anything you want more depth on. And we're going to work on assignment 041101, which is the make portion of our functions unit. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. Our objectives are that you can recognize the need for functions, implement them using patterns that you have recognized in the past, write comments clearly, and use your debugging skills. Let's get started. First thing I'd like to look at is our warm-up. So our warm-up was to take a look at this piece of code and figure out what happens. The main gist here is there's a lot of subversion of expectations going on in here. JavaScript makes some of these things here act in really unexpected ways, and it's up to us to debug and figure out what's going on. So the first thing is, how do we debug? There's two ways. You can either put console.log statements in the between each of these ifs to figure out what's going on, or you can use a watcher on the result variable and see what happens. Either way, you should be able to figure out that this if statement up here does not work properly. S plus t gives you a number other than 0.3. And the reason for that is JavaScript is weird, and you shouldn't be using vars if you're planning to work with decimals. You should be using another approach to allow yourself to type the variables into specific things that there should be expecting to store. We'll be talking about that later in the class, hopefully, but for now, just know that this has some weird properties. It doesn't work as expected. Second, this here is just a straight up mistake. If you put 1 equals, it means assignment. This will work, in a sense. It'll store 5 inside result, and it'll return a true, so the inside of this if statement will also happen. Very, very weird. So be careful. You need to have 2 equals for this to work as expected. And last but not least, this last if statement unexpectedly as well works. 9999 is actually identical to this very large one with a bunch of zeros number, and similar reason to this top, a very large number to JavaScript is the same as any other really large number. So you have to be careful. If you wanted to make this comparison, you'd have to let JavaScript know ahead of time that it's expecting a large number. So be wary when working with numbers inside JavaScript if you're going to use vars, and make sure you understand how to debug. Moving on. Sorry about that. Moving on. There is a lot of stuff out there outside of code.org that can be really good, such as Khan Academy. Here's the Khan Academy unit on functions. It's very, very thorough. I highly recommend you check it out. The cool thing here is if you press this play button, you'll have somebody voice over what they're thinking or talking about, and they'll type in this interactive window, and you can also type in it. Pause the video and type in it or change the numbers, and you can see it change in real life over here on the right. Very neat. So enough about that. Hopefully you guys check that out on your own. Next, let's do some scope review. So remember, scope has to do with where a variable is created, where it exists, if it's global or local, and can you access it. In this case, we have a variable called test. We set it equal to 1. We add 5 to it and store it back inside test. Test minus minus means take test, take 1 away from it, and set test equal to that amount. But the problem here is we said var. Be careful. If you say var test again, what that'll do is create a brand new variable called test. That brand new variable has no value whatsoever. So if you try to subtract 1 from it, it will give you an error. This gives you an error. There is no result. For this second one, we have our test equals 5 rather. 5 is less than 6. So we create a brand new variable called test and set it equal to 0 and add 1 to it. What is test at the end of this? Well, it's just 1. Inside if statements for JavaScript, there is no scoping, so this just overwrites this variable test up here with a new variable. You should probably avoid doing this. This is not expected behavior in most programming languages, and it's not a good habit to get into. So if you wanted to have another variable in here, name it something else, or leave the var out of it and just set test equal to 0. Over here, this is just a kind of review. So if you did the same thing again, create k inside here, it'll still exist outside the if statement. Again, things you write inside if statements persist outside, and they're just executed sequentially. There is no code block here, despite the curly braces, to set it apart. Now, here's an example where there is local variables being created. The variable inside the function is local to that function. It only exists inside here. And once you get it outside, there is no more of this variable. So what happens? We create a variable called does, put 5 inside of it. We have a function definition here. So let's skip over that for now, since that code is not executed yet. Here we say, okay, do the function stuff. So let's go back and do that. This creates a brand new local variable that only exists inside this function and nowhere else, called does. It is an overloaded variable, meaning if you were to refer to it inside here, we would be referring to the local version rather than the global. Once this function is done, this variable ceases to exist. So when we call console.log of does, we will get 5, the global version. The global version is not erased because this local version exists. They are separate. That is an important distinction to be aware of. Hopefully all of that makes sense to you. If not, shoot me an email and we can discuss. For your assignment for this week, you need to complete 04-11-01 by Wednesday at midnight. This involves you writing a short program that works with an interface that I give you. You need 4 variables to make this work. You need some kind of conditional. You do not have to have a combination of words you display for every single color, font, text size configuration. That would be crazy. Just a couple is fine. You can use the setup I've given you here and just fill in the blanks with your variables. That is perfectly acceptable. If you'd like to switch it up, you can as well. Down here, you need to have at least one function to update your screen. Think about what kind of words you'll be repeating, what kind of programming statements you want to happen more than once, and then put them in a function. Down here, each of the buttons that the user can interact with is going to need its own on-event. There's a total of 4 of them, so you should have 4 things here, and each of those things should be calling update screen inside of it. Here's the rubric. Please note, you must have at least one function, you must have comments, and the other things I think are pretty straightforward. You've done them before. Hopefully that all is good, and if it's not, please send me an email and we can work things out. Otherwise, I will see you guys in a couple of days. Have a fantastic rest of your week.